Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast exploring storytelling on film, as well as interviews with industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater, as well as other areas of the arts. If this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. Today I'm going to be reviewing Taxi Driver from 1976. This classic film was directed by Martin Scorsese. It was written by Paul Schrader, and it starred Robert De Niro, Cybill Shepherd, Harvey Keitel, Jodie Foster, and it also has appearances from actors such as Peter Boyle and Harry Northup, who I just recently interviewed. And before I jump into the review, I want to cut to what Harry had to say about working and acting in Taxi Driver. Have a look. Jumping into Taxi Driver, I watched this again the other night because I mean, I've seen it several times, but it had been a while. And of course, I have this one as well. And what I like so much about the film, I mean, people talk about how, dark and dramatic it is, but there's also a lot of comedy, a lot of real dark comedy, of course, from that decade. And I think a lot of the comedy comes from those scenes with you and Peter and De Niro in the cafeteria. So I know that there was improvisation done, in the rehearsals, which was scripted, and the improvs were then scripted, and then that's what you shot. So is that what you remember? Basically, Scorsese not sticking to exactly what Paul Schrader wrote, and that you all sort of were able to contribute improvisation and then shot the improvs, basically?
When Marty called me in to come to Columbia, which is right next to Warner Brothers, the Burbank Studios, he gave me the script, and he said to me several things. He said, first of all, when I thought about Travis, my number one choice was De Niro, Harvey number two, you number three. I gave it to De Niro. I want you to play Doughboy. And then he said to me, I'm going to shoot Taxi Driver in such a surreal way no one ever has before.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, he said, I'm going to shoot Taxi Driver like a gothic horror movie. And three, he said, I'm going to use those garish 50s B movies, colors. And then he said to me, the dialogue is too straight, the way we like to work sideways.
Right.
So I had also driven a cab at one time, so I knew a lot more than anybody really about driving a cab. So, for example, the first line in the script was, when Peter Boy says, Travis, do you know Doughboy? And or vice versa. In the script, it was, yeah, we went to Harvard together. So I threw in a line that I heard a cabbie say to me one time, hey, Travis, you got change for a nickel. And then, the things with Peter Boyle and me, those were improv.
Right.
And so the other thing, Peter Boyle and I shared a big RV and for 2.5 weeks. And he was just one of these witty guys who could make me laugh. So yeah. I'm sitting there and he starts carrying on about the woman, he hops in the back seat with, et cetera. And then he gets me laughing. So we improved a lot in that particular picture. Obviously, you can't. The thing about doing a movie, a script's around for a while, and then you can freshen up the dialogue. In this case, you can't change the action. The action that when I got the script, I realized, okay, I'm the guy who gets, drives De Niro to get the gun, or guns. Yeah. So I knew I wouldn't be cut out. That's always, they always have to go with that, and so that made me feel good. And Marty loved what I did.
Yeah. No, it's really, really wonderfully done. So I imagine were those improvs, were they directly shot on set, or did you already do that in rehearsal and then they gave you the sides? And was that how those improvs came to be on the screen, or was it just done right on the set?
We were, we shot at night in New York, those scenes. So it's like 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock in New York in the summer. And then, so at 6 o'clock, Peter Boyle and I would meet at Marty's suite at the St. Regis on the 17th floor. And he would have an assistant there and she would record everything. So Peter Boyle would come with a big yellow legal pad. And then whatever he would say, I would come up something better. He'd just say maybe I don't know if it's in the script. Like I had a guy the other day who had a dog and the dog threw up on my back seat. And I'd say, well, I always charge him $5 to clean up the mess. Whatever it was, you
Right.
talk about two guys in the back seat fighting, you so and so and you so and so. And I would
Mm,
come up with the line in there where I got a laugh. And so they take all that material plus the script in the script, the dialogue in the script, and then they would when we arrived on the set about 8:30, Marty or the assistant would give us the new script. So we'd have that.
I
So we
see. I see.
and then we would also work improv from that.
I see. I see. And you said something interesting was that here you were with De Niro and Scorsese, the the biggest, some of the two of the biggest and best talent at that time, and so you felt, well, maybe the other cab driver should be even crazier than Travis. And I think that, I mean, you and Boyle and everybody certainly accomplished that. How did that's such a great instinct. And again, we're talking about your inventiveness. And how did you come up with something like that? Like, did that just kind of come right out of your gut to think, okay, let's see if we can make these guys a little nuttier than Travis? Or how did that come to you?
And at that time, I was living in West Hollywood, and I remember one night this vision. One of my favorite sayings is from a title of a short story by Delmore Schwartz, "In dreams begin responsibilities." So I believe as an artist, a poet, or an actor, you get these visions or you get lines coming to you, and obviously it has to fit into the vision of the director. But at one point, when I got the idea to sell De Niro a piece of Errol Flynn's bathtub, I thought, well, what happens if I do this and
Right.
he or Marty said, no, you can't do that. And I said, look, I can't worry about other people. All I can do is do my character and get these and be prepared and allow that. And so when I told Marty after that first scene that I was going to leave, and then I said, I'm going to leave in this scene. How about if I come back? And I had the piece of Errol Flynn's tile with me, and I pulled it out and I ran the dialogue down to him. And then after I try to sell it to De Niro, I will exit. And I said, you don't have to do a new setup, because obviously 45 minutes to do a new setup, they don't want to take the time. So I said, if you don't like it, you can just cut it. Marty said, I
Right.
love it.
Right.
And then, as you know, at the end, De Niro just kind of shakes his head and says no. And so
Yeah.
that, and I did it, as you mentioned earlier, because I thought, if you and I met in a cab stand and I tried to sell you a gun, you might think it's Harry, an undercover guy.
Right.
So I got to try to show him I'm sicker than he is. And in the future, somebody's going to try to sell somebody a piece of Robert De Niro's clothing, that
Right.
whole.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it works so beautifully. I even love the way De Niro responds to you. Like, he's looking at you like you're absolutely insane to try to get him to sell a piece of Errol Flynn's bathtub. No, it's really, it's so good. You could do a whole mini series just on those guys in in that cafeteria. No, it's beautifully done. At what point did you move to LA from New York?
In 1968. Let me just say one last thing
Oh,
about
sure. Go ahead.
Taxi Driver. The other thing that I noticed about being an actor, okay, they dress the leads in primary colors usually, and then the supporting actors, they kind of subdue their clothing because they want the focus to be on the main guys. So there was a scene in Taxi Driver right at the end, or toward the end, Belmore Cafeteria, De Niro, Peter Boyle, myself, and another actor. And I thought, okay, this scene, and then pretty soon De Niro is going to start killing people. So I thought, I'll go buy a red shirt. So I went down to 42nd and got a red shirt. So you have red, and Marty, as we know, loves red. So you have red shirt, red blood. So subliminally, so all those, being like Scorsese or Fellini, a painter too, they're very interested in, the whole visual, obviously. So that's one thing.
Taxi Driver is a film I've seen many, 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 many times. And when I watched it last week before talking to Harry, it's been maybe 8 years. It's been a while since I've seen it. And the great thing about a film like this is that it's really a work of art, because every time I watch it, I see something new. And obviously, in the last 8 years, as I've gotten older and I have different experiences, things change for me. And you go back to a movie like this, which is a complicated portrait of this man played by Robert De Niro, Travis Bickle. You'll see you'll see more and more. And so my early experiences with this film, when I first saw it when I was 15, I was quite young when I saw it. My cousin had it on VHS and lent it to me. And I really can't put into words why it had an effect on me at the time. I mean, obviously as a kid, the violence was something that would interest me as a teenager, because to see some violence on film like that. And I remember watching the bloodbath at the end a number of times. But something struck a chord with me with this character, and I had never really seen a film like this 70s gritty films. And every time I saw it after that, I would see more and more things about it. And I think I particularly connected to the loneliness of the character of Travis. I certainly had a period in my life when I've felt like that, when perhaps I wanted to connect with someone who didn't want to, who hurt my feelings and rejected me, very much like you see with Travis being rejected by Betsy, played by Cybill Shepherd. And yeah, it always stayed with me and haunted me, and I've always really, really loved it. And I had an argument recently on social media. Where else? As we all know, Martin Scorsese came out in the last few years or so where he said Marvel films are not cinema, and I agree with him. And I did a video about why I agree with him. I'll put it in the description box below if anyone's interested. And I was arguing with someone who I think was in their 20s about it, and giving my views. He was giving his views, and he actually said something that I thought I could see why he was saying it in a way. And he was saying, well, because I was saying that those Marvel films are very formulaic, they're cut and dry, they're too simple. And he would say, well, what's, a really simple film that's just about pure evil and has a one-dimensional character is Travis in Taxi Driver. And I was shocked to think that, how can you say that this film is how can you say that about this film, that he's just pure evil? And it made me think, about just films in general, and partly why I'm doing a podcast like this is because so many movies are very, very simple. Of course, in the late 70s, we had the rise of the blockbusters, and storytelling, at least in the mainstream, became simpler and simpler with visual effects and action and stuff like that. And the Marvel films, of course, are an extension of that as well. Not to say that before the 70s, everything was a complicated, character study, but there was this time, as we all know, the New Hollywood movement, where in this very short period, the late 60s to the mid 70s, we had these complicated character studies. And I think a film like this would be hard for people to grasp nowadays, because Travis, I mean, I can see with this person I was arguing with, in a way, why he felt that way, because in today's climate, it would be difficult to empathize with, harder to empathize with, this is just my opinion, with someone like Travis, because his flaws are very, he is deeply flawed, and his flaws are dangerous and hateful. And a lot of his flaws are, he's a misogynist. He turns to violence and rage when he's rejected. He's racist. He's clearly has issues which are ones that, where he feels that as a way to solve his problems or to use violence. And where these are things that particularly today are, and for a lot of reasons, and rightfully so, are being looked at under the microscope closely, is why do, but not why are people, men like Travis like this, but just sort of, obliterating that kind of behavior and just throwing it under the bus. And of course, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a good trait to these are, I'm not saying these are good traits. Obviously they're bad traits. Obviously if you're a racist and you want to turn to violence and you are misogynist, obviously that is terrible and awful. But you need to empathize with people who are like that in order to understand why they're like that. Otherwise, you're just going to criticize them, and it's easy to do that and look at them as pure evil, and you're just going to get more and more people popping up like that. So you have to be able to understand where that behavior comes from in order to perhaps help someone like that. And this is really where Travis goes wrong, is because he doesn't have anyone to help him. And is that his own fault? I don't know. I mean, the great thing about a film like this is they don't spoon feed you everything. Scorsese and Schrader don't give you all the answers, and it's extremely complicated because he is a veteran. You see off the top when he becomes a cab driver, and he says he was in the Marines, and he clearly is someone who's troubled and needs help. So why he hasn't had help, no one knows. But this goes back to Vietnam. A lot of those guys came back and didn't get help, suffered from PTSD. And so those are wider issues. And indirectly, you see that in Taxi Driver, because he was in the Marines and he's clearly deeply, deeply troubled. And, it's interesting because, I mean, even Harry said that, Scorsese had said to him that he was going to, use horror elements and surreal elements, and other people have commented how it has a noir elements, and now I could really see all those genre themes and those aspects of the film. But for many, many years, I was always just really taken with the character, and of course the brilliant performance by Robert De Niro, and I often would think about him. But now when I watch it again, I don't know how those things went over my head for so long, because you clearly see the noir in it with the use of voiceover, themes such as alienation, and just the claustrophobic feeling. This guy's he's boxed up into this cab, which Paul Schrader said was like a metaphor for loneliness, like this moving coffin. Again, coming back from not World War II like we saw in the classic noir period, but here coming back from war like Vietnam and feeling like his options are not great, and he's feeling as though he feels extremely lonely and alienated and isolated, and is turning to crime, and his impulses are ones of crime. And and the horror, of course. I mean, that ending is horrific, but Travis does some horrific things in this, which I'll get to in a bit. But the thing with Travis is that, as he says in the voiceover, his loneliness has followed him his whole life. So why that is, you don't know. But he's a lonely man, and his objective off the top, as he says in the voiceover, is to become like everybody else, and he wants to do better, and he's trying. And of course, what does he want? He wants to connect with someone. He wants to have a relationship, and this is where Cybill Shepherd's character Betsy comes into the picture, and he's been of course, the black humor of the 70s, the dark humor. He's somewhat stalking her outside. She works for this campaign for the presidential nominee, Charles Palantine, and he's outside of the offices just looking at her. And those very comedic scenes that Cybill Shepherd had with Albert Brooks. God, how did I just realized I forgot to mention Albert Brooks at my introduction. How could I forget Albert Brooks is in this film? Because he's wonderful, and I love that he clearly is has feelings for Cybill, and he's joking with her a lot, and those scenes were really, 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 really great. And then of course when Travis comes in, you see how he's jealous, and again, all that stuff was done visually. It's the use of blocking there, which I'll get into in a minute, when eventually Travis comes in to the headquarters to meet Betsy, and how Albert Brooks's character is in the middle of all that. So he gets the courage to go in, and this scene is also very funny. I mean, I know even Tarantino, who had Quentin said this is one of his favorite films, and he mentioned the humor, and there is a lot of humor. And Travis comes in and he goes right up to this woman and he says, "I want to volunteer to her specifically." The first thing he says is, "You're the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." And a classic guy, even though he's so he's so inappropriate in a lot of ways and forward. There are certain things he does which are typical of men. It's like, well, I'll find something I can say as some kind of an icebreaker to be able to approach this woman. And of course, what he comes up with is that he wants to volunteer there, but he doesn't really want to volunteer there. He wants to have a date with her. And when she's asking him questions about, well, what do you think of his stand on welfare? And he's like, well, I really don't know his stand on welfare. And the first thing she asks is, what do you think of Palantine, something about the campaign specifically. And he just kind of stops De Niro. It's just so brilliantly done. Kind of looks around like it's almost like he forgot what he was there for, which was to tell her to volunteer. So this was not about volunteering. This was about finding some way to break the ice with this woman. And but what's interesting is that he is charming in that first scene. He's confident. He was charming. I mean, he's forward for sure. But he was sweet, and you could see that she was flirtatious back, and that she was sort of found him appealing. And when they go out, and again in that scene, again Albert Brooks is brilliant because he's in the background, and at one point you just see his head pop in as he's peeking, at this conversation, because clearly he's jealous and he's wondering what Travis is up to. I love that. I just love that you see his head in the background pop up as De Niro is talking to Cybill Shepherd. And again, the scene is very funny. This date scene where she's talking about her job and stuff, and here's this guy who like drives a cab all night. He's totally alienated, and he's just trying to come quote unquote appear quote unquote normal, whatever that means, but a conventional, I suppose. And he's making jokes that she doesn't get, and she's making jokes that he doesn't get. And then he starts to talk about how he doesn't like Albert Brooks and all this kind of stuff. But he certainly is awkward, but he convinces her to go out again. And of course, this is where things go downhill, is bringing her to a porn theater. And a bit of trivia is that De Niro said Cybill Shepherd, who plays Betsy, was so uncomfortable on that street around. I mean, they're just shooting this on the street around, this tough area, 1970s New York, with the porno theaters and the prostitutes and drug addicts on the street. And Cybill Shepherd was getting really agitated, and it was perfect for the character because she says to him, "You got to be kidding me! You're bringing me. This is a dirty movie." And he convinces her to go in by saying all kinds of couples come here. And he does not understand why she walks out. As he says, "I can take you anywhere. I've got all kinds of places to take you to." And she storms right out. And I could totally understand that. But the thing with Travis is, this is what's mysterious, is that you don't know why he would think that's appropriate. But he's clearly been so alienated, and he can clearly only see things through his own eyes. This is the thing with Travis, is that he has a hard time empathizing with others or seeing what the world is like. He can only see things through his own, viewpoint. And he never learns why that was inappropriate. He just thinks she stormed out for a reason which he cannot figure out. And as he tries to get her back on the phone, you see later, of course, there's that classic shot where, as Scorsese said, he could barely watch this guy call her and try to get another date with her, and she's making up excuses that she can't see him again, and the camera goes into the hallway as if to say that the camera can barely, feels bad for this guy. So this is when things begin to go downhill. This guy who says he wants to become part of society, he's got this one bad experience, and boom, he contradicts himself by now going totally against that. And it really hits him hard. I mean, this is the thing about him. He's like a teenager being rejected for the first time, or coming out of your first relationship. He's 26 years old. Like, he's young, but he's not that young. I mean, he certainly is very, very naive. And so he takes this really, really badly. And this is immediately when you begin to see his mental health decline. And what I really like was that what Scorsese and Schrader does here is that you never really know what he's going to do now, because as he goes back to the office and tells off Betsy, and Sybil Shepherd said De Niro was actually so scary, literally scared her in that scene when he goes back into the office and says, "You're in a hell, you're in a die in the hell like the rest of them." This is when you get to see his misogyny, and even in the voiceover, he talks about women just being like a union and that she's like everybody else, cold and distant, and he takes this so badly, and this feeds his hate, and this is what the thing is, this guy doesn't have any friends, and this is where the humor comes in. His friends are the guys in the cafeteria, the other cabbies that Peter Boyle plays, and Harry Northup, who I talked to. And as Harry said, they developed trying to make those guys even crazier than Travis, which which makes it funny, but also tragic at the same time, because his only thinking was to ask Peter Boyle, quote unquote, the wizard. The irony is that his name is the Wizard, for advice, and he gives him the worst advice ever. And I don't even know what he's talking about. I don't even think Wizard knew what the hell he was talking about. He just tells him to go on and get laid, and he goes on. What he says actually makes no sense, and you see De Niro's reactions. Like, what? And then he even says to him, "I don't know, it's about the dumbest thing I ever heard, man." But this is when he begins to say, "I've got some bad ideas in my head." So what are these bad ideas? At this point, the audience doesn't really know what this guy is about. We're getting to know him. We see how he's taking things badly. It's like, okay, but it sort of smells like violence. We're feeling something. Is he going to kill her? Is he going to go on a rampage? There's actually a noir from the early 50s called The Sniper, which I've reviewed, which is also an empathetic view of this serial killer. And also when he's rejected by women, he wants to kill them, and he does kill them. And apparently that was an influence on this film. Actually, I've reviewed that film as well. So if you haven't seen it, I'll leave it in the description box down below. So, what is he going to do? And then, at this point, he's already met Charles Palantine, the candidate, and he tells Charles how much he hates the city. And that, you just may as well flush the city down the toilet. And you see his fury about how much he hates the animals that come out at night. As you see early in the voiceover, all the animals come out at night, and he goes on and on. So he blames his problems on his environment. And I'm not saying the environment don't make people. I'm not saying that an environment doesn't put you in a bad headspace. And obviously he's around rough people in his cab as he drives all night. But he often, the thing with Travis is that he blames others, and he blames women, and then he begins to blame now Palantine. And again, this is done visually. You don't. Of course, later on he tries to kill him, and you don't know exactly why he wants to do that, but there's enough suggestions in the fact that he's constantly going to his speeches, watching this guy, watching him on TV, and he's got his posters even in the bedroom that say, "We are the people." And what is this guy talking about? He's talking about people coming together. We are the people. We'll solve the problems. And I think Travis was basically saying that's bullshit. He felt as though I'm not being included in this. And of course, who is part of that campaign? Betsy. So does he want to kill Betsy? Does he want to kill Palantine? Does he want to kill both of them? You don't know. And then you when he gets the guns, now he gets all these guns, from, again, Stephen Prince, great performance as the gun salesman, the documentary that Scorsese did on him, American Prince. I love it. He gets all these guns, and the guns become almost like a toy. And of course, the famous scene, "You Talking to Me," in front of the mirror, was improvised by De Niro. All it said in the script was that he plays with the gun like a toy. And so that has been quoted so much. You talking to me, the last 46 years, that it can be easy to forget what the context of that scene is about. And here's this guy who's about to go on this rampage, and he's pretending that he's shooting people who are provoking him and that he's tougher. So it's almost like the violence is a game to him. It's almost like the pleasure in it as he's acting out these fantasies, that he wants to just take everyone out. And if he can't be happy, then no one can be happy. And these people are making his life miserable on the streets, and the politicians and women. He'll take out everybody. And now this is what's really horrific is his racism. And then what you see earlier is just the way he looks at Doughboy, for example, one of the cab drivers in the cafeteria there. There's a great shot where the camera is actually a POV. There's so much POV in this. The whole film is from Travis's point of view. And he says, he calls him, ironically, Killer. And he goes, bye, Killer, because he lent this guy some money. He lent Travis money, and Travis gives him the money back. And the camera is this POV shot of De Niro walking out with Wizard. And it cuts back to De Niro just looking at this guy. And even as he met him in the first part of the film, the first scene, he hardly says anything to him as they meet. He just kind of glances at him. And then the way he was looking at black people on the street, just that glare right before he has that scene with Wizard. And so what does he do? You see that scene where he shoots a black guy who's holding up a convenience store. I mean, Jesus Christ, shoots this guy in the face. I mean, kills him. And it was like he was just looking for a reason to do it. And why did he have to do that? I mean, even if he wanted to stop it, he could have just put the gun to the guy's back or the back of his head and told him to put his gun down or something but he was looking for a reason to shoot that guy. It wasn't about, stopping him because he's doing a robbery. It's about, this is what he wants to do. And what's even scarier about that is immediately after that scene, it cuts to him with the guns in his hand, looking at a black person on a television. And it's that was really horrific to me. I mean, talk about horror elements. This guy is scary. I mean, there's certainly a lot about him. Like I said, his flaws are dangerous and hateful and very, very scary. However, what happens after this, and I think this is where the balance of finding different sides of this guy is that he wants to help Jodie Foster, who we saw earlier in the film, come into his cab, and Harvey Keitel as Sport takes her out, and he gives him a crumpled up, I think it was a $10 bill or something. And he never spends that money. He has it in his pocket. And you see later how he gives it back to the guy who works for Sport. And he says to him, this is yours, spend it right. And this is interesting because he knows this. It really bothers him. That truly bothers him. This is more of like where his better sides come in, is that he wants to really help this girl. He wants to save her, have her go back home. And he's right. When he meets her after the next morning, after he initially meets her, he tells Sport, brilliantly played by Harvey Keitel, that he wants to sleep with her, but really he just wants to talk to her to get to know her, find out her name, and says, you got to stop doing this. And what he says the day after was, he's right. You got to stop this. You got to go home, go back to school, and things like that. So he wants to save this girl. And again, this is the thing, is that this is where the innocence come in, is that of Travis, is that he just thinks, oh, she should go home. But what he doesn't ask himself, well, why is this girl and a prostitute to begin with? And no one knows. You don't know. Was she kidnapped? Was she part of a sex trafficking ring? She doesn't seem to really want to go home. Is that just because she's so used to where she is now, or conditioned? That's really up to the audience. I mean, what is he sending her back to when she does go back home to Pittsburgh? You don't know. But again, his intentions are good. His intentions are to save this woman. And this is where the anti-hero part of the film comes in, is, he goes and shoots up Sport, played by Harvey Keitel, and all the other guys in there, that bloodbath at the end. And what's interesting is that he was going to commit suicide. And he, as we saw, he ran out of bullets. Classic scene when the cops come in and he puts his hand to his head and makes the bullet sounds with his mouth. And he didn't have enough left for himself. And right before he goes on that rampage, he leaves a note to Iris, gives her a bunch of money and says, by the time you read this, I will be dead. So I think he was so depressed. He had no one to turn to. He didn't know what to do, to the point where he thought it was hopeless, but he was going to go out with at least getting some revenge on the people who he feels, some of the people, well, most of the people, at least in this story, that are making him the way he is. And so that's tragic, right? And I'll take everybody out, including Palantine, which he doesn't manage to do because he gets spotted and he runs off. But his plan was to kill the Palantine, the presidential nominee candidate. And right after all that happens, and he does survive, he gets attention from the press. He gets that letter from Iris's parents that Iris is back home. And I think he felt good. I mean, there is a certain sense of peace to him towards the end of the film. Of course, now Betsy comes back. She gets into his cab. And if you look at De Niro's performance in this, so iconic, so great, he looks very peaceful. And then, of course, that great last shot where he looks in the rearview mirror as if, did I see something? And what did I just see? And as Scorsese said, his problems are not solved. This is, his problems go beyond some pimps and some other people. His problems are internal, but his way of dealing with everything is to eliminate people, take them out. Now, is that from being in the Marines or what? Is that something to do with a mental illness of some kind? You don't know. It's ambiguous and it's complicated. But this clearly struck a chord with this film with a lot of people. When it came out, there was lineups, and as Paul Schrader said, he's a lot of those people were kind of in those initial lineups that he saw were like Travis types. And actually, I should talk about this DVD. I mean, I know there's a lot of releases on this film. This is a good one because it's 2 discs, has a lot of featurettes. This is, again, it's an older one. I know it's people probably today are more interested in getting the Blu-ray. But it's a 2-disc set. It's got a lot of great special features. And one of the things that Paul Schrader said was that someone literally approached. I like the artwork as well. It's really, really nice. Someone, I'll just show that side as well. Someone, and it comes with this sleeve. I want to get to my next point, but I'm looking at this. Someone literally approached him and said, "How did you find out about me?" Because he could relate to this character so much that he thought Schrader was telling his story. And as Schrader was concerned that the guy had a gun, but he said, this film, a lot of people could relate to it. And, what's well known also is that this was something that Schrader actually went through. His life went downhill. His wife left him. He was going through a divorce. He had a job at the AFI that he was I believe he was let go or fired or something. And he was very, very depressed. And he realized that he was sleeping on friends' couches and stuff like that. And he realized he hadn't talked to anyone in days, a few weeks or so. And he hadn't talked to a soul. And from that, he wrote this script. And it's a wonderful film. And like I said, it is an empathetic look at a man like this. And I think, we need more and more empathy today as a way to understand people that perhaps we don't agree with or we don't like or even we think are, repulsive. But there's enough about Travis to see his humanity, and it's bringing you right into that world of someone like this without any kind of judgment, without any kind of lesson or message or victimizing him or anyone. It is what it is. That was that great thing about not just, I'm not saying this only happened in the 70s. There's always been good character studies, but particularly this time, New Hollywood movement brings you right into that world, and you can take from it what you want. So, it's always like a film that I would always say was one of my favorite films. And so many people say it's one of their favorite films, to the point where I just thought, well, this is getting cliche. So I always want to, be different. But really, I know so many people talk about this movie, but really, you can't take anything away from it, because it is stunning. Everybody's great in it. Like I said, De Niro, even as his life, just the looks in his eyes as Travis is declining and then feeling better, and how he looks off the top as he's trying to fit into the society. It's all in his eyes. It's not about necessarily what he's saying. It's about what he's experiencing. And I thought De Niro was just, I think a large part of the reason why we still talk about this film is because De Niro really brings out this guy's humanity. So it's not just the writing and the filmmaking; it's also the performance. Harvey Keitel, fantastic as Sport. When I must say, first time I saw this film, wasn't really too familiar with Harvey Keitel. Later on, I saw Mean Streets, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, Reservoir Dogs, Bad Lieutenant, and I think it was a few years until I actually realized that was him. He's got that wig on. The voice is different. He actually hung out with a pimp that he knew to get into character. He's fantastic. Jodie Foster as well. She was only 12 or 13 when she did this, but her moments with De Niro are great. I love that. That was something they learned from a real junkie, was in the scene with De Niro when they go for breakfast. As she keeps changing her sunglasses and putting sugar on her toast, was something they saw a junkie do. So she incorporated that with her character. Cybill Shepherd was also really, really great. Again, her scenes with Albert Brooks are really organic and have a lot of humor, and they really work beautifully off each other. And of course, her scenes with De Niro as well. And as I mentioned, Harry Northup, Peter Boyle, all those guys in the cab, in the cab drivers in the cafeteria scene, really brought that dark humor and more this behavior that is nuttier than perhaps even Travis is probably looks at them like, these guys are nuts. I can't say enough. I can't say enough about it. It's a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, it is on Netflix. But I highly recommend getting either a DVD or Blu-ray of it, because it's loaded. Like this one, for example, loaded with special features. I'm sure the Blu-ray is as well. So thank you so much. There's also one last thing I'll say is Scorsese's in this. Of course, he plays the guy who brings De Niro up to that he's going to kill his wife. That was supposed to be another actor who was in an accident at the last minute and couldn't make it. And so Scorsese did such a great job. What's interesting is he did like a cameo in it before, when we first see Cybill Shepherd, which was like his Hitchcock cameo, I suppose. And so then we see him again as another character in it. It's not really a big deal. I don't think it really distracts that much. Maybe it's the same guy. It's not like it's so out of place. But that scene is quite disturbing, and he says the language I can't even repeat. Again, he's someone. These are the characters Travis is meeting who are not crazier than him. And so that's a great scene. He actually said something that he learned from De Niro, is that, he would tell De Niro to put the meter down. And when he told him to do it, De Niro didn't budge. And he says, "What are you doing? Put it," he had to tell him like 3 times. And then De Niro, when they weren't rolling, said to him, "You got to make me do it." And then when you see him, he really gets him to put the meter down. And so again, that's about listening and answering, not just kind of following a script cue to cue, but really actors really working off one another to cause and effect, to really get the other person to respond. So he said that was something that he learned there. But it's a wonderful film, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. And if you've seen it, watch it again. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this review and my chat with Harry, who plays Doughboy in the film. I want to just mention that if you're interested in leaving a donation directly to the YouTube channel, feel free to do so by clicking the thanks button directly below the video box here. It's right beside the like, comment, and dislike buttons. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so here on my YouTube channel by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.